Welcome to Allow Us to Explain for Our National Conversation. I am your host, Alex Julian, a podcast intern here at Our National Conversation. On this episode of Allow Us to Explain, we're talking about the 2024 race and election. Please welcome to our podcast, Tania Udas Ortiz. Our first talking point would be the second Republican candidate, Nikki Haley. So what are your thoughts on that?
So Nikki Haley is the, I guess, quote unquote, upcoming contender for Donald Trump, right? She's still on the ticket despite all her other colleagues dropping out of the race. She's typically described as a true conservative. And in case we didn't know, Nikki Haley is a former South Carolina governor, and she was Trump's ambassador to the United Nations. Haley currently is 52 years old as compared to Biden's 81 and Trump 81 as well. So she's really has weaponized her age on this platform, saying she is going to bring a much younger perspective to the United States and is going to be of more healthier mind as compared to Biden and Trump. Now, she is the daughter of Indian immigrants, so she really utilizes that platform as well to showcase herself as a very diverse and open to dialogue candidate. Now, she has gained a reputation in the Republican Party, again, as a solid conservative who has the ability to address issues of gender and of race as compared to her other colleagues who are more so white and non-immigrant, or they were we did have Vivek Ramaswamy. He was of relation to that as well, but he didn't last long in the race. But she has pitched herself as the defender of American interests abroad and here in the United States. However, she has called out Donald Trump for his too brash of approach when it comes to US politics and how that is not embracing of dialogue. But nonetheless, we have Democrats who also call out Haley, saying that she's just playing the face card or playing the diversity card to gain votes, while herself is not really open to diversity or actually open to dialogue to get America talking again. So, Alex, I wonder, what do you think of this perspective that Nikki Haley really prompted this out, that the United States was never a racist country. So focusing too much on that isn't worth her time. What do you think about that? Do you think that's gonna hurt her in the long run, or do we think that's gonna get diehard conservatives on her side?
Well, that is very complex in a way, but she needs to acknowledge that the fact that America is not a perfect country. No country in the world is. But we need to confront but we're able to achieve a lot of great things that other countries could not achieve, and that still have problems today. We need to just confront our issues and say, yes, this was wrong, but we can't just say, oh, and shun it out, ignore it, like, oh, this didn't happen, because it did happen. And we have to acknowledge that we needed, like, just because, Black people are no longer slaves and we have colored waiting areas and people are a lot more accepting now, we still need to say and teach the younger generation that this was wrong and this is why we do not practice this anymore, because it didn't do much good for our country. And the more we unified with each other, the greater we saw greater success in our future. And that's how we will continue to see greater success. And I do think that will hurt her campaign and has continued to hurt her campaign, because she's not accepting that the fact that she's not reaching out to millennials and Gen Z voters on the fact that that she's not talking about these race issues, but she can actually, and seeking common ground. Like, if you just ignore it and say, it's not worth my time, you do need to confront it and be able to, so that they can maybe have a better understanding of yourself and what you and your campaign stand for. So if she just ignores it, she's not really helping herself.
No, I definitely agree. What about if, I guess for all students here or past students, if a presidential candidate were to come up very open about taking away student loans or figuring out a way to really help those students who do have loans, will you be more likely to vote for them in the upcoming election, or will that actually make you not want to vote for them this upcoming election?
I do think that we need to actually not just flat out get rid of student loans, but we do need to help people, find employment. Like the fact that we're just throwing all of these kids to the wolves and, they've basically been in college or they've been living at home. Like, for instance, when they're at college, they're living at the dorms or they're living at home, they're going to their local state college. But if we just throw them to the wolves and say, here's all your debt, go find a job, is that really helping? No, of course not. We need to be able to help them find employment and find jobs after school and even sometimes even before graduating. And not everyone is fortunate to get an internship during school and or even after school, and it takes some time and it's hard, but in my opinion, there is no right or wrong education. Like, it's good to have skills for your future, especially in the times we're living in now. For instance, we can't, this isn't the 60s and 70s anymore when you can't just, oh, you can graduate high school, get a factory job, and you'll be set for life and you'll have retirement and healthcare. Not at all. That's not how the world works our country works anymore. We need to be able, for kids to get higher education and skills so they can progress in life. But we also need to not just say, oh, well, here's all your debt, you go find a job. We need to be able to be able to help them be able to find employment so they can actually learn, so they can actually have some, not just learn, but have some skills that they can fall back on and help them when they graduate and they don't have to be all stressed out like we see millions of college graduates doing. Like, they're all freaked because they don't know how they're going to get out in the real world and find employment and find a good secure job and position.
Yeah, I'm very open to a candidate who is, I don't want to say taking an extreme stance on student loans, but who's actually going to get the job done and help a lot of us who have student loans. Because let's be honest, the cost of living is increasing every month, not just every year, every single month it's going up. Particularly if you're in California, which one of the most expensive states to live in. It's hard to go by live even if you're just even if you don't have student loans, but a lot of people do, and they're barely able to make ends meet and not actually able to pick themselves up because they have to pay these high interest rates and then the principal amount. And Biden is introducing a new student loan relief, which is putting that, well, it's proposing automatic relief up to the entire federal loan balance for borrowers who are considered highly likely to default in 2 years. Now, that is, I guess, for some quote unquote extreme, but I'm all for it. If he can actually get this done between here and November, I could see myself voting for him because this tells me that he's actually committing to the things he said back in when he was being elected, that he actually cares about the average American. Because while not all Americans have a college degree, this is actually going to help open up more opportunities for Americans because we have a big chunk of Americans not so concerned on paying this debt off. So we're going to see more money trickling back into the economy, right? Which is a good thing. We're going to see them more willing to buy houses, which is again is a good thing, or become more entrepreneurs, which is again is a good thing, right? So let's say Donald Trump were to introduce this, like, hey, I'm gonna wipe away student loans, but only if you elect me in. And he has the votes or the promises from the House, from Congress. Do you think you'll be more willing to vote right, even if you haven't in the past?
Mhm. Well, I don't know. I actually, funny story about me. My mom was in the military, and lucky me, I got to get the GI Bill for my education and stuff like that. But I do heavily understand because I have friends who have student loans, and yeah, it's no small cookie. It's brutal, and you don't want to be slaving away 20 to 30 years, having to have this massive debt that you only use for 4 years of school, or maybe even 6 or 8 years if you get a master's or a PhD. So it is very tough. Like that's why most people, oh yeah, their parents encourage them to get scholarships or to go into the military because you can have, you know, you can save money and you can actually have something that you don't have to worry about for a very long time for the rest of your life. And but still, I mean, I do I don't know if I'm willing to vote right or left at this point because like my vote is kind of a personal decision, but we're just going to have to see how these next few months pan out and what will each candidate say about, oh, student loans and money and how it's a problem and we need to help these kids and all these other young adults get jobs out of school and something that they can have on that can help them pay off their debt and not just say, oh, just get a job, that'll be the end of it. No, that's not at all how it is for a lot of Gen Zers because they're going to be the brutal reality of the situation is they're going to be paying this debt off for at least 20 to 30 years or even more. So our second topic is immigration. What are we going to do and how are we going to fix this major issue in the United States?
So the immigration debate has always been very lively here in the United States, especially in our border states, right? In every election, immigration and the border has always been brought up. And that's not a surprise because we in the United States have taken in a quite big number of immigrants, more than our other allies. There's some statistics that I found, and I'll just go ahead and share them, that showcases that for example, the Migration Policy Institute has told us that there are more than 12 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States, and past studies have found that more than 6 in 10 didn't cross the border um, illegally but overstayed their visas. Immigration from South America and the Caribbean is increasing, including greater numbers from the countries that don't have a long history of mass immigration into the US, such as Nicaragua, Ecuador, and Venezuela. And notably, we're also seeing an increase in Chinese immigrants. So this influx of immigrants and just congestion the border is again heating up this debate, right? So we have Biden himself, who is looking to strengthen the border, but he's not getting support because Republicans want a more strict immigration policy in place before we work on the border. And then we have Trump, who's the potential nominee for the upcoming presidential election, is very strict on the border as well, but he's more likely to take on a harder stance in terms of who we're going to accept and how long or where we're going to accept them from, right? And Nikki Haley is toting the same line as Donald Trump. That's where they're really similar in and being very hard on the border and of immigration. So there's just some similarities that we see there. But on the Democrat side, or I guess the more independent side, you do have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's running as an independent, and we didn't know he is the son of U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968 during his own presidential bid. I believe he's also taking a hard stance on immigration as compared to other ones like Cornel West and Jill Stein, who are more open to the border and more open to increasing migrants coming to the United States. But what we really need to recognize that if we want to have a conversation on immigration and on the border, we need to understand the system we have in place right now that doesn't support our migrants who do come in legally to the country. It's very much a system where we accept them and then let them roam free without giving the support they deserve, right? So they can become self-sufficient and live a very fruitful life. So in such case, we see a lot of migrants having to heavily rely on a welfare systems, which creates this narrative that they just come here to leech from Americans, which is why we're getting these huge taxes and the government doesn't care about us. But it's more than that. The reality is that we just don't have enough resources and programs to give these migrants who come legally support, which is the conversation we need to have that I expect our presidential candidates and current president to actually contend with.
I would like to ask a follow-up question to our previous one on immigration. What do you think, how are we going to help America as a whole with racial disparities and tensions in the United States? How are we going to reform criminal justice, education, and healthcare and make it better for all Americans, no matter what your ethnicity or gender or identity is, and to make it that identity politics don't matter?
So that is a whole lot to be solved. So, in order to be able to tackle that, we need to understand the structures that are in place in the United States. So, what infrastructure, for example, has fed into these disparities, right? And I'm saying infrastructure because here our national conversation, I was on the infrastructure policy team and we researched how infrastructure has led to racial inequalities, right? When I say this, this means funding public schools get. This means access to bus stops, bus routes, access just to, again, public transportation in general, or to more urban green infrastructure. These little things have fed into greater disparities. So, in terms of what steps can be taken to ensure these voices and concerns are heard and addressed, we need to first address our past and address the fact that it has had impacts to this in this current space that we are in. So let's say we pose this question to Donald Trump and say, how can you ensure that the voices of the marginalized are going to be heard? Well, first of all, he's going to say there's no marginalization. It doesn't exist in the United States. We're way past that. So then again, we're at a roadblock. If there's no acknowledgement that people have been marginalized, we're not going anywhere. But then you have Biden who's going to say, yeah, there's a problem, but he never really tells me what he's going to do about it, right? And the policy he has implemented or has, I guess, acknowledged doesn't really hit the way it should be because he never has the right organization to fulfill it through. This can be an example of like the broadband programs we had under Barack Obama to improve broadband in rural areas. It was great in the idea of connectivity, getting people connected, but the programs never met their goals because he didn't have a board to oversee every program. So then we see these rural areas who have alleged broadband, but not good enough broadband to actually connect to the internet, which is a problem in terms of the broadband disparity in the United States. So in terms of steps, again, trying to make more sense, we need just that acknowledgement. No matter how conservative you are, there needs to be acknowledgement what has been done in the past has impacted our current spaces. And that's not to say that we still have this racist attitudes as we did in the past, but more so understanding how impactful that is still now. So just acknowledging that, but also the intersectionality of racism, right? So how it affected structures, how it affects perception, how that then affects people's stance in the world, right? Is just those general acknowledgments. And again, in order to actually get people heard and then implement that in policy, these people need to be in the room. They need to be in the room where it happens, right? You cannot form policy and not have real Americans who are going through these real issues and giving their perspective on what they should be doing. It's much like how what's happening in India. We're having farmers protest over not having good wages, having high debts. We had the president of India make these committees, but he never actually got these farmers involved in the committees. So then they never actually made any progress. And that's a problem because then you're never actually giving the perspective that these farmers want or what they need. So again, you're at other roadblock. So again, it comes really down to um, giving them the mic and giving them the time to share what's actually going on.
So I do understand that. I am also of minority descent, even though I don't look like it. My grandparents were an interracial couple. My grandmother was Japanese, and she actually came here 10 years after World War II when my grandfather was stationed in Japan. And they faced loads of prejudice at the time. It was during the 50s and 60s. And as we all know, many Japanese Americans were not treated very fairly during World War II. They were placed in new internment camps, and after they got out of the camps, when the war was over, their homes were outright destroyed, and there were racial slurs written all about them throughout their homes. And, it was just a very horrible time for them. I believe that we do need to confront our racist past, no matter what ethnicity has been, for instance, have been prejudiced against, and that's been many different types of people. It's been against blacks, of course, Hispanics, Asians, and even whites, and certain faiths as well. But if we need to confront the fact that we are going to change this for the better, but that is a major concern, and that is what our candidates do need to talk about, but that's not a top priority for me as well. What we do need to see is that we need to be able to we need to acknowledge our past so we can learn from it, but not dwell on it. We need to be able to confront our issues so that things can be better for the future generations and teach why racism and prejudice was wrong. What are we going to do towards looking for the future, for future generation voters, and for the youth voters? How are they going to impact this election and the future elections going forward? And what will our country need to expect and look like in the next 10 to 20 years?
So this may be a very cynical perspective, but I believe Gen Z is quite cynical of politics, of our popular political parties. There's a general distrust of our political system. So what I do see, what I expect to happen is to see more Gen Zs voting independent. So that's going to have a big effect on our Republican Party and Democrat Party, where we're either going to see a decline in young voters, or we're just going to see a sort of washed out electoral uh, election happening, right? So because there are these statistics that show that more than half of Gen Zers, if it was just 58%, and almost three-fourths of those who identify as Democrats say the country's problem can only be solved with a general change in leadership. So that either means they don't want Biden, or they also don't want Trump. So this general change is kind of up in the air. Kind of in first, they want something that isn't the traditional Democrat or the traditional Republican, which is where Nikki Haley is trying to get in and say, hey, I'm not like either or, I'm better because I know what's good for America. I'm a true-blooded American and stuff like that. And yeah, so I think there's just this weak enthusiasm for the election in general. So if we can sort of get Gen Z, or like the younger generation, like not younger because the younger ones can't vote, but Gen Z in particular, more fired up about this election, saying this is the time where you can weaponize your voting rights, and really get America talking again and get that conversation where it needs to go. That means reminding them that their vote does have power and their voices have power as well.
Okay, great. Um, thank you for our panelists for being here. You made some very great points. Tanya Rudaz Hertiz, thank you for being here. I really appreciated your well-detailed points. Don't forget to check us out on our website, ournationalconversation.org. Be sure to check us out on our podcasts on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Also, please follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and X/Twitter at NATL Convo. And finally, feel free to visit our next website, and please tune in next week for our next topic, which will be DEI and higher education. Thank you.